Hello. First of all, I'm Thomas. He is Max. We are obviously brothers. So there's going to be a few different disciplines that are going to be involved today. First of all, since this topic is related to hearing loss, there's probably going to be one or two people in here who are going to need some sort of transcription. Just check the chat. There's going to be a reminder for the live transcription that you can use in order to understand us better. Also, in case we are talking too fast, too quickly, or not coherent enough, please tell us to slow down. Okay, there's enough time for that. Okay. First of all, hearing training. What exactly is hearing training and why would you want to train your hearing? Probably not too important for most of you. However, for a lot of patients, and also the main target group of today's topic is older people, because hearing loss, especially in old age, is a incredibly prevalent thing. And usually when your hearing degrades, you just get a hearing aid. However, when that hearing aid is not powerful enough anymore in order to sustain communication, or when your cochlea, so your inner ear, is damaged, you're going to have to need a newer system, which is called a cochlear implant. In a gross simplification, what the implant does is it shocks the cochlea, so the inner ear, at the same positions that you would usually get a chemical reaction, in order to have an electric signal that goes to the brain that to you, as the bearer of the implant, sounds a bit like hearing something. It's incredible technology. It's also something that Elon Musk is probably very much jealous of, because it's an actual neurological implant that works. However, it is incredibly difficult to start actually comprehending what people are saying. As you can imagine, when you're tinnitus, it depends. It depends. It's a longer answer. We can go into that at the end. When you try to reduce the signal, the usual audio signal, into 12 to 24 electrodes, there's going to be a lot of loss, and it's just not going to sound right. And it's very important, it doesn't sound natural. You can imagine that, for example, if you have a call with someone and you have very bad reception, and then you put another telephone in front of that telephone, which picks up whatever you are hearing. And then you do that 10 times in a row. And whatever you are left with is somewhat what sounds like for most people who have a cochlear implant. So in order to get back to hearing, you need to actually train hearing. Usually, there's going to be a professional who tries to help you with. For example, I do that in my actual day-to-day work. However, there's like with language learning, there's a large part that you have to do on your own. So in order to do hearing training at home, you're going to need some form of application or a program that you can use. And when you think back at who gets the cochlear implants, which is a lot of older people, you're going to have to design something that you can use to train your hearing in order to understand people again, but make it as accessible as possible. So we were trying to make a hearing application that uses Wikidata lexemes, but there's a few things that we want to keep in mind, and you can try to keep them in mind and see if along the line you think that we met those targets or we didn't. Easy accessibility is it's incredibly. If you think that it's incredible, it's when you think the bar is low for accessibility. When you think for example, about your grandparents, that you want to show them how to use your phone, think even lower. Okay, so it has to be actually usable by people on their own, especially when they're not that competent with digital devices. Long-term engagement means you need to have a lot of training material, because if you only hear the same word, I don't know, if you have like 100 words, after a week, you're going to be done, and there's no more new training that can happen. You need some form of quality control, because as these people are hearing impaired, you can't just throw, I don't know, a wrong audio file at them and just expect them to understand that there is no wrong audio file. And you also need, or at least we try to include additional audio files to train dialects and femilects, because that is a very underrepresented part of hearing training. However, we're going to find out whether that worked. Now, for therapy itself, what is StartSit? It is single word training, which means you get a single word, you press play, you hear it, and then you have to decide which one of the options that you're given is it. You also get speaker differentiation, which means you get an audio file, or basically you get two audio files, and you have to decide, is the speaker the same? Which might sound easy to you, but for someone who's listening with a cochlear implant, it's very difficult. So in order to have some form of base training, we also included that, and also minimal pairs, which means you train words which are which only differ in a single sound. And in order to really focus on specific sounds that you want to train in order to hear them better. It's usable on most devices, or the ones that are relevant, especially for the population. You need and we also included a metric ton of audio files, just because you actually need that many. So in order to actually produce something that is usable in the long term and doesn't just get boring, just imagine if you're trying to learn a new language with Duolingo, and the only 10 topics that you can do, you have done, you're just not going to open the app again because you think you've got it, or maybe you actually do have got it. So you need a lot of audio files, and we managed to somewhat include dialects. That's it. Hearing training app or program. Yeah, we got a lot of words. It's amazing.
And on the technical side, what we did was a cross-platform application, also based in Flutter. If you listen to the talk I gave 2 days ago, that's the same basic setup, like a Django backend and a Flutter frontend that is available on like the web, Android and iOS platforms. iOS is still not published. We're gonna get to that. The lexemes that we included came directly from a Wikidata query I did once, so it's not dynamically updating or anything. It's just a big, very simple, give me all German lexemes. In this case, we also try to go multilingual with the user interface, but right now it's mostly focused on German patients because that's the one we had at hand. And there's also a direct usage of the pronunciation audio files that were linked on the lexeme pages that are of course not included directly in the app, but only linked and played from the common server to make that more efficient. It has also some very interesting technical facets that I wanted to highlight. For example, as Thomas mentioned earlier before, there is no real account sign up thing. You get like a randomly created account on Startup, but it's still personalized for your use case, but there's no thing that collects like at least data that you really input. So some data is collected on the backend, for example, like what you do in the app, but still there's no email addresses that are collected ever, or like any kind of IP addresses. There's a lot of work has gone into making this as frictionless as possible to get into it. And the one feature that I wanted to highlight is that we actually have like a internal control mechanism for the Commons audio files. So the players get assigned like a skill score depending on how well they perform with the examples that they're given. And if we are confident in that our players are pretty good at their hearing, or at least a bit farther progressed, then we take their wrong rounds as an indication of something being wrong with the audio file itself. This has helped us actually to find some very bad examples, like audio files that were either completely wrong, where someone said like a different word instead of the one that was actually linked in the file, or where someone has like extremely bad recording equipment, like so bad that it's actually not discernible. Or the most often error that you encountered was cut off recordings that were just stopped too early and you didn't get the rest of the word. And this is the app in its beauty. This is the mobile version, of course. As you can see here, there's like a very simple setup screen.
That is something that was incredibly important, because I cannot state this enough. It is so important that you have an app or a program that you can give to an older patient who barely knows how to turn on Wi-Fi or mobile data, and to open and not press something wrong. And so this is literally what you see when you open up without the spinning. You see just the start button. Okay, there's nothing where you have to log in or anything like that, because that is enough of an hindrance. And I've seen this in the actual day-to-day use of them. This is enough of an hindrance that it actually that it's actually gonna be a point where patients are gonna stop using that because it's just too much. So just to have that open up right as it is a lot of work in the background, but it's incredibly worth it.
And as you can see, there's also an indication of your training progress today. We try to motivate people to actually play like a specific amount of rounds each day to keep them engaged and to have like a bit of a gamification idea. And the one at the bottom we're gonna get to. This is the main like word training screen where you have like single word options. At the top you see like a audio thing that people can press, and then the two words below that are the ones that are suggested by the app, and one of them is right, one of them is wrong. And the further you go into the game, like the more the app is convinced that you know what you're doing, the more options you get presented at the bottom, and the closer the options are to the actual solution. So we did like a little Liebenstein distance thing, where the further you are in your training progression, the less the words differ from the actual solutions down there. And that's like the main screen that most people see in their day-to-day app use. We have also some others. For example, here's like the game selection if you want to play something different for a change. Like the more difficult ones, of course, speaker disambiguation and minimal pairs is extremely hard, like even for people that are good at hearing. Like I sometimes struggle with them.
Yeah, and also you can see one of the blunders that we actually made, because even though we tried to make it as accessible as possible, as we wanted to also include new recordings that people or even relatives of those patients could make in the app, we actually placed the feature to record new audio at the top, which means that was already another problem, because people opened the app and then first thing they wanted to see in the list was, oh, you can record audio, which is obviously not the training part. So that small thing, even though there is a clear design choice where you said, okay, you can train what to üben, you can train the words in the second space. But since it's not at the top, not the easiest solution, that was already a problem.
Yes, and this is the web version, just to show the difference in the screen size. Like this is the speaker disambiguation view, where you have like two buttons that you can press. Like the ones are clickable before you progress to the next one, like the equal sign and the stricken through equal sign. And you're hearing two different recordings or two times the same recording, depending on if the answer is right or wrong. And if you progress further in the speaker disambiguation challenge, then you actually get presented different words from different speakers to make it really hard. At the beginning, it's the same word from different speakers, which is also, I think, a statement to how many recordings there are of different pronunciation files, because we actually found like quite a lot that were recorded twice that we could use for this kind of feature. Pretty good. Yeah, this is our self-feedback session. I try to include like some more complicated features. For example, that you could record audios and like specifically define that only like your relative or the person, like if you have like a relative that you want to record audio for, that you could give it to them to be included in their training loop. And it was very complicated. You had like an ID that you had to give to your relative, and they had to enter it with a PIN. And it was so complicated. I think only in testing it was really used, and afterward in the real world, no one wanted to get into it, which was very sad, because I invested a lot of thinking into it. But yeah, no matter. And also the audio recordings didn't really work out. There was not a lot of engagement. I think maybe doing it in a different app could be more useful. And also the dialect aspect. We tried to include it as well as possible, but from on a data side, there weren't that many recordings that were actually tagged as, for example, Bavarian or something in that direction. So it was a very sparse data set, and it didn't really contribute to anything much, sadly.
Yeah, basically, even though, because usually when people make some sort of recording, they tend to steer into or veer into the main dialect that you speak, or like the High German, for example, that you speak when you try to make a good German impression. Sadly, for hearing training, it's incredibly important to actually have some sort of dialect recordings. So if you have any idea to get more of those, please go ahead.
And what worked is, I think I was very engaged by the whole composition of random lexemes that the app highlighted for players. Like there was a lot of silly examples, like the Fleischetikettiergesetz thing, like the longest German word was an example, or all of the fun word ending syllable street names, like amazing stupid stuff that all had recordings, and that I think no other app that does like audio hearing training ever would have included.
Which is also a good thing, because usually when you get a hearing training app recommended by, for example, the clinic that you got implanted in, it's usually gonna look the same somewhat. You start with incredibly frequent words, stuff like days, months, numbers, and stuff like that. So when you're done with that app, you can't really go anywhere, because that's the same stuff that you get in the other app. So it was somewhat weird on the first tries, but it was actually a very good thing at the end. Also, there was a significant usage at home, which speaks incredibly for the amount of data, for the quality of the data, but also that the interface was actually usable on their own. Because usually when I'm working with other people with a cochlear implant, you show them the app just like you would show your grandparent, and you try to work them through it. And the moment they get home, they have one error message and it doesn't work anymore, and they give up. And the fact that it still worked at home was very important for keeping in, once again, those patients with low digital literacy. Yeah.
And the audio quality control by hearing aid patrons was surprisingly effective. I wasn't even sure that it would work. Also, thanks, Lydia, for the word. I forgot. It's too long for my brain to keep in. And future plans would be to move the backend to Truefish. I have not posted the link to the app here. It's not a secret or anything, but it's not. I'm trying to keep it as stable as possible, and not trying to get as many people on it as there are. I still have to release the iOS version, and it would be very nice to incorporate like new files and lexemes, and the results that we actually got from crowdsourcing, the damaged audio files and stuff, is still not contributed back to Wikidata Commons. We only reported that in like the master thesis that we wrote, but it's still up for the discussion and should be probably done at some point. Yeah, and that's it. And thanks for your attention.